Now it's time for today's perspective and a warning today of a cycle of depression, self-harm and potentially suicidal content for our children and our grandchildren. It's the warning from Amnesty International France, as it says that the social media app TikTok is still steering vulnerable children and young people towards such content. New research by the organisation called Dragged into a Rabbit Hole. It highlights TikTok's ongoing failure, the organisation says, to address its systematic design risks affecting children and young people. With us to discuss the findings is Deputy Director at Amnesty Tech, Lauren Amistad. Thanks very much for being with us on the programme today. Tell us first then simply what you found.
We found that 2 years after we first did our original research into TikTok, that children and young people who experience or express an interest in mental health content rapidly fall into a rabbit hole of depressive content within less than an hour of scrolling, and that within 3 to 4 hours of being on the app, they are being shown content romanticizing suicide or users that are expressing their intention to kill themselves by suicide, or even videos showing methods to kill people, kill yourself. And this is 2 years after we did our original research, where we also showed that accounts in other countries such as the US and Kenya and the Philippines were being dragged into these rabbit holes of depressive content. So 2 years later, not enough has been done. And within the EU, there is this robust, this legislation that should oblige very large online platforms to mitigate and to address their systemic risks for minors, so children under the age of 18. And that simply isn't happening. And that's what our research shows.
And this
today
happens to anybody who looks on TikTok, even if they're looking at, I don't know, if they're trying to look for dress designs or something like that?
So we did find that our researcher who was doing the manual experiments, who was actually on the app herself, was being shown the depressive content within a number of minutes of being on the app. Now, the thing with the app is that it shows you a highly personalized feed of videos. So it picks up on the things that you watch. And often the things that you watch might not necessarily be the things that you think you're interested in. And in that way, the app is able to, the way that TikTok describes it is that it responds to your interests and the interests that you express through the videos you watch. However, we argue that that can also pick up on your mood or protected characteristics, for instance. And in that way, it can trap you in these rabbit holes of depressive content. If you go on feeling depressed, and we're saying that children and young people who already are facing mental health challenges, who often may be children who seek comfort in social media, are the ones that are particularly vulnerable and may find that their mental health challenges are exacerbated by this personalized, highly personalized feed.
And I know that you think it's part of the underlying business model, isn't it? The whole problem, why this is happening in the first place.
Exactly. The whole business model of TikTok and many other big tech companies is about the attention economy. They want to keep your eyes glued on their screen for the longest amount of time, because that allows them to, one, keep you on the app, but also collect personal information about you. And with that personal information, they can sell that to advertisers, and then advertisers can put their adverts in front of you. Or you can sell this information on people to other people who can use it elsewhere. So people may go on thinking they're getting a product, but actually they are the product. The people who are, I think one of our families that we spoke to described how their child had become a product. Their information is commodified. And in that way, they want to learn everything about you. I think you wouldn't invite somebody into your house and allow them to rifle through all your drawers and your cupboards. But in some ways, that's what happens when you go on these apps. They are collecting all this personal information on you to sell it. And the way they keep you engaged is by showing things that they think you're going to be interested in. Sometimes that might be benign, it might be cats, but often, especially when it's highly, highly personalized, like TikTok, and it's responding to the things that you're watching as opposed to positive signals that you give it. So you're not, necessarily telling them that you want to look for cats, then it can respond to your mental state. And in that way, it can really shape and manipulate how you feel. And lots of the people we spoke to, that's exactly how they feel.
What would you advise people to do? Because there are a lot of parents, a lot of grandparents perhaps who are watching this who may be well aware of the problem and know that their children use TikTok all the time. What advice would you give to them?
Well, TikTok have put some mitigation efforts in place, but our position is that it really shouldn't fall on the user to try to resist what is essentially an extremely addictive design. TikTok is designed to get people hooked. It's not safety by design, and it's not designed in the best interests of children.
It's very difficult, though, isn't it, to get children to keep off it when all their friends are doing it?
Absolutely, and that's why in some ways it shouldn't fall to them. It should fall to regulators to regulate the apps properly, and the apps themselves to change their business model. We're calling on apps to, instead of having a personalized feed by default, make it an opt-in, and then when you do, make sure that people have to express specific interests. So they have to go in and say, I'm interested in dresses, dances, and cats. It's probably unlikely that people would go in and say, I'm interested in self-harm and suicide. But they get trapped there because they're shown stuff that grabs their attention and that is the most extreme content. We already know that people end up in rabbit holes of extreme content because that's what they are subconsciously drawn to. So for us, there are things people can do, and just being aware of the addictiveness of the app can help. But really, it shouldn't fall to users. It's about regulation and also the apps changing.
You mentioned before, didn't you, the European Union's Digital Services Act? I mean, it came in 2023, required platforms to identify, mitigate risks to children's rights. It's plainly not working, is it?
So far, no. I mean, it's only been around for 2 years, but there is also an ongoing investigation into TikTok. And we really hope that this new research will feed into that investigation and we will see strong enforcement action, because we do believe that we have shown that 2 years after we first revealed the dangers of TikTok to children with mental health challenges, not enough has been done. So they clearly aren't mitigating. And their recent report for under the DSA really didn't have enough information about what kind of mitigation strategies they're taking to address the evident risks on their platform for children and young people.
And you put all your findings to Amnesty and to TikTok, and no response.
This time they haven't responded. We have been in touch. I believe they have responded to other media outlets. They wouldn't necessarily agree with our findings, I'm sure, but we're quite used to that. I think we think we've proved that there are evident risks. I mean, obviously there's limitations to this research, which is why it's so important that apps also grant access to independent researchers to investigate the algorithms on their apps. It's an imperfect situation where we're doing research, and they argue it may not necessarily replicate a real person, but also, we weren't necessarily inputting all the signals that a child or young person would. So, the rabbit hole effect could have been worse. But it does highlight why it's so important that apps grant access to researchers to do this independent research into their algorithm, and then the app themselves can take action where risks and abuses are identified.
Thanks for joining us on the programme today. Lauren Armistead there from Deputy Director to Amnesty Tech. Thanks very much for being with us.